Well, whether you're taking a vacation or visiting your family, any circumstance now that requires Americans to travel by airplane has become a burden. Airline prices have become so high that traveling is becoming more difficult to afford. That's why we have airlines like Frontier and Spirit, who are much more affordable options. You may not get the best service, but they'll get you from point A to point B. However, that may not be the case much longer for one of those airlines. JetBlue has sought to purchase Spirit Airlines, seeking to merge the two for $3.8 billion. And if they have their way, we may be looking at much higher airfare prices. But, and this is a big but, the Biden administration, and what many are cheering as the first positive development from the White House, plans to stop this. The Department of Justice has sued to block JetBlue's proposed acquisition, saying that it goes against antitrust laws. JetBlue and Spirit's CEOs have both since released statements supporting the deal and opposing the DOJ's action, to which I would usually say they're a private company, let them have at it. But in this case, I say no. For once, the Biden administration is keeping costs low for us. Let's not ruin that. Let's relish it and enjoy it while we can. Joining me now is the host of Nothing But the Truth podcast and criminal defense attorney Bob Bianchi. Bob, the Biden administration, in a stunning turn of events, is trying to keep airfare prices low. I want it to stay that way.
Right, Addison, this is like really interesting, and it could be a generational divide here. I was just talking to my father the other day. He's 90 years old. And when I was a kid, we used to get on the plane and the stewardess give you the wings and the seats were huge. It had spiral staircases that you could walk up, a bar, a piano. And I was like, Dad, was I making that up? And he goes, no, kid, that's the way it was until deregulation. And it may be one of those few things when deregulation occurred, the idea was obviously to create a competitive environment. We all like that. But what happened was there were about 50 airlines that started up, but they all got gobbled up by the big four. So you lost that element of competition. So what we see right now are services declining and costs going up. And right now, I'm a guy 50 years later who's proud or happy when they give me a little bag of pretzels. What a change. I mean, obviously, it's craziness. Something doesn't work. I feel like I'm jammed in the seat. It's not because I'm getting bigger. It's because the seats are getting smaller. You get your little bag of pretzels. You have to pay for your bags. And why is this happening? Well, they want to be a private business when they're making profit. But like when COVID hit and other times, they've gotten $54+ billion. They come to the taxpayers of the United States, me, you, and your audience, and they say, bail us out. But when they are doing well and they're making profits, they don't give any money back to us taxpayers. So I actually think that this is probably a good move because I think all industry experts agree that this low-cost fares that we have are going to skyrocket if this kind of merger is allowed to occur. It will only get worse and go into bonus and dividends of the private companies' pockets. I'm sorry to say they didn't look out for the consumer when they were given all this power to do business.
Now, do you think that the DOJ's suit, this antitrust objection here, do you think that it's going to hold water in the long run? Sort of what are both sides essentially saying? Obviously, you have the airlines and you have the DOJ. What are both of their arguments that they're up in arms over?
Right. So, I mean, each one is saying the same thing. It's going to be a question of what, side you're going to believe on. Again, I just gave you the historical perspective. So that kind of goes against the airlines arguing like now we want to be part of the big five. They've already indicated that they're going to start ripping seats out. Routes will be limited. Prices look like they're going to go up. So that's the argument the DOJ is saying, is that the conglomerate or monopoly laws, if you will, the antitrust laws, are allowed to be implicated when it stifles competition and gives consumers fewer choices, essentially. And that's exactly what this is going to do. So that's the DOJ's argument. The airline's argument is that this merger is going to be great. It's going to allow us to be competitive with the big four. And therefore, if we're in the big four now, the big five, we'll be able to give consumers a better opportunity. I think that's what their argument essentially is. But I think we have to look at this for what it is. It's a money-making opportunity. And I think most industry experts agree that if you eliminate an airline like Spirit that affords very low fares, very competitive fares. That's the reason the top four have some limitation to them, because they can't go too far beyond what those other airlines are doing. So those are essentially the arguments that are going to be made.
Yeah, I think keeping Spirit Airlines not going through with this acquisition, I think it's a win for the American families who maybe they have to buy several seats for their kids. Maybe they have a lot of kids and they travel to go see their family on the other side of the country. So I think anything that's going to benefit families, benefit the American citizens, I think I'm all for. So I, for now, applaud the DOJ so far as it stands. Bob, one more thing that I want to get to with you. This is from Law and Crime. Florida Republicans have doubled down on plans to increase executions in the state of Florida by introducing legislation that would allow for child rapists to be put to death. Now, there's some conflict here with Supreme Court precedent, what the Supreme Court has ruled, and what Florida legislators want to do. What is that conflict? What is Florida looking for?
Okay, they also want to do one other very important thing, that you no longer need a unanimous verdict of 12 people, that it can be an 8-4. In other words, 8 jurors say execution. I think these are terrible ideas, Addison, and no one was more conservative as a prosecutor than myself, and I prosecuted death penalty cases. But I have to ask you and your audience, after everything that we've seen in the past couple of years, do we genuinely trust the court system to get it right? I mean, really? I mean, I practice in the court system every day. And even as a prosecutor, I mean, I was very distrustful of even guilty verdicts. I mean, what judge you get can make a difference. I'm not talking about whether bad people should be executed or not executed. I just don't trust the system itself. And lately, we've seen, whether you're on the right or on the left, each one screaming at the other one about the politicization of prosecutors and the courts. Is this the place where we're going to reduce a verdict to 8 people instead of 12 people? We want to now criminalize all sorts of crimes, child rapes. Terrible, horrible. Nobody agrees with it. But now you're hearing people say drug offenses too, and this and that. What it's going to become is just execution by public opinion. We're even getting to a point right now where we're passing laws in certain states that are allowing prosecutors to be removed from office if they don't agree, with the political establishment. So we've lost all sorts of checks and balances here. I think this is dangerous, especially the 8-4 piece. Hey, look, if you got the case, if you got the evidence, bring it on, baby. 12 people should be able to say guilty just as much as 8 people will. We're just making it easier to execute people. And again, trust me when I tell you, my friend, the court system does not get it right a lot.
Now, what do you say? People would respond to that by saying, well, these people have to be punished either way, so we're going to have to use the court system to administer some sort of punishment. I guess the question then becomes is if the standard should be these people qualify for the death penalty or life in prison without parole, and of course there's always could be double jeopardy where they can't try the same case again. So how do you come down on that issue, Bob? If the court system is the only one that can punish these people, what are we then to do?
Yeah, Addison, I mean, this is why, even again, I was a homicide prosecutor, and I have tried death penalty cases as a prosecutor. So I'm not like philosophically against the idea of it. But I've seen, depending on the judge you get, depending on the lawyer and the level of representation, I've shook my head many times in a courtroom as a prosecutor and said, I cannot believe the level of lawyering that's going on, or a lack of lawyering that's going on here. And this can be the critical difference between whether somebody gets convicted or not. Of course, the obvious is obvious. If there's ineffective assistance of counsel or some level of malpractice, if you don't have the ultimate punishment, death, if there is an innocent person, we see innocent people released all the time. Look, I mean, not a lot. Don't get me wrong, the system generally works, but is it worth taking a risk of executing an individual who didn't commit a crime that's in a system that is really flawed? That's my problem with it. It's not whether people should get the death penalty or not and what kind of crime or not. And all we're doing by the 8-4, which disturbs me more than anything, is lowering the standard. We're just making it to the point where eventually, if you don't like the individual and the court of public opinion doesn't like the individual, let's lower it to 6. Let's lower it to 3. Let's lower it to 2. Let's lower it to half a I mean, yeah, eventually you can convict anybody if you keep rigging the rules in a way where the checks and balances are not in place. I think this is really dangerous territory.
It's interesting. Bob Bianchi, great to have you on the show as always for a legal perspective on all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Addison.
Coming up next, we will discuss highlights from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.